Oklahoma is the land of second, third, and last chances. Who were the people that made it so? We'll trace the golden threads they've woven through Oklahoma history. The Red River Institute, JohnJDwyer.com, and our signature sponsor, Atwoods, present Oklahoma Gold. While John J. Dwyer is completing the Oklahomans Volume 2, he is sharing his microphone with Red River Institute board member and award-winning author, broadcaster, and avocational historian Wade Burleson. I'm Gwen Falconer-Lippert. We'll dig for the golden nuggets of Oklahoma history here now on Oklahoma Gold, the Burleson Chapters. Dignifying our history by the stories we share. Wade Burleson, the magic of a 5-year-old Arapaho boy? What is this story?
Gwen, I'm pastor of a really large church in northwest Oklahoma, and one of the things that I try to avoid is what I call people blindness. Sometimes we get so busy with our lives that we miss the people around us. So I want to tell you a story that is not only current and present, but it ties to the past. It happened to me on October the 15th, 2017. We have 3 Sunday morning services. I was walking through our large facility, and I saw 2 young ladies. They were beautiful young ladies. One was 16, one looked in her early 20s, and I found out later they were sisters. And I introduced myself. I'd never met them before. And they were blushing and kind of shy. And I said, "Girls," I said, "are y'all new here?" And they said, "Well, Pastor Wade, yes, we are. We know who you are." And I said, "Well, what's your name?" And they introduced themselves. One was Francesca. She was 16. The other was Alice. She was 24. They were sisters. And I said, "Girls, you're beautiful. Do you mind me asking, are you Native American?" And they blushed a little bit and then smiled big and said, "Yes, we're full-blooded Cheyenne Arapaho." I said, "Really?" I sat down at the table. They were eating some donuts and drinking some coffee. And I said, "Would y'all mind if I just told you a story about Arapaho Cheyenne heritage, the heritage that you two have?" And they said, "Oh, we'd love it." So I sat down, Gwen, and I told them this story. And, you know, we have a lot of mass shootings in America today. It just breaks our hearts. One happened this week. The Las Vegas shooting a year or 2 ago, I mean, just crushed all of us. But most people don't realize that there is a national monument. There is a national park, only one that has the word massacre in it. And it is the Sand Creek National Massacre Monument in southeast Colorado. And I told the girls this story. On November the 29th, 1864, the Civil War was going on, but some white men from Denver, Colorado, part of the 3rd Colorado Cavalry, came to a place in southeastern Colorado where some Arapaho and Cheyenne were encamping, about 1,000 of them. These Cheyenne and Arapaho had signed a peace treaty with the United States government, and when they saw the soldiers coming, they were militia, they were volunteer soldiers. Most of the regular troops were fighting the Civil War back east. When the Arapaho and Cheyenne Indians saw the soldiers coming, they came out with the American flag and waved it, and they came out with the white flag and waved it. One of the Indians was a chief by the name of Black Kettle. If you're from Oklahoma, you probably know of Black Kettle. He would die a year later, shot by George Custer in Oklahoma. But he survived this particular massacre at Sand Creek. Here's what happened. The soldiers just shot and killed everybody. Men, women, boys, and girls. They were upset because they'd found a family that had been scalped near Denver, and they came out to take their revenge. The problem is they killed people that had nothing to do with the scalping. It's just awful. Well, if you go to southeastern Colorado to the Sand Creek Massacre Monument, you can learn the history of this awful, awful massacre. But I told the girls, I said, what's really interesting about this is that there was a 2-year-old boy that survived. He was the son of the Arapaho chief And he survived because there were a couple of soldiers that protected him. One was a Colorado militiaman by the name of Lemuel Graham, and the other was his friend Jesse Wilson. And they took this boy. They didn't kill him like the other children were killed or the other men and women were killed. They took this boy and hid him in a stove and took him back to Denver. And nobody knew who this little boy was, but he was the only survivor of
In
the
a
Sand Creek
stove?
In a stove, yeah. They were in a caravan, took him back to Denver, hid him, 2-year-old toddler. When they got to Denver, they renamed him, and they named him Wilson Graham. Wilson, the last name, the surname of one of the soldiers, Graham, the surname of the other soldier. Wilson Graham was his name. And by the way, Gwen, if you've ever seen that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, you know the volleyball, he named it Wilson. Well, I've known this story for years. So, man, when I heard that movie and he'd call out, Wilson, Wilson, I would think of this little boy, lost all of his family, now adopted by 2 American soldiers, and they put him in the circus, a circus that they owned. Yeah, he was an Indian boy. And what would happen, Gwen, is that they would travel the Pioneer Plains, and they would set up their circus with the animals and all the shows, and then they'd have this savage Indian boy. Because you got to remember, back in the 1860s and early 1870s, you know, Americans were scared of Native Americans. And so they'd parade this little boy out, and he'd do some tricks that he knew. Graham Wilson was his name. Well, now fast forward, 3 years later, he's been traveling the circus. The United States government, President Andrew Johnson, they're having trouble with the Plainsman Indians. The Plainsmen are very angry with the Sand Creek Massacre, very angry. The United States government is at war with them. The Civil War has ended. It's October of 1867, and the United States government is demanding peace with the Plainsman Indians. So at a little village north of Oklahoma, by about 30 miles, called Medicine Lodge, in October of 1867, the United States government comes in force for a powwow, a peace treaty with all of the Plainsman Indians, the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, the Kiowa, the Comanche, the Apache, the Ponca, and so on. For 2 weeks they meet, but the Plainsman Indians would not show up. They would not come unless the government brought the circus boy.
So how do you stitch that to the present?
Well, the Native Americans wouldn't come and meet with the troops for the United States unless the survivor of the Sand Creek Massacre was present. So General Tecumseh Sherman, General Sherman, the one who blazed the trail from Atlanta to the coast during the Civil War, he was ordered by President Johnson to go find the boy. He found the boy and brought him to Medicine Lodge. And for 2 weeks, the government negotiated with the Plainsman Indians to resettle in Oklahoma, and eventually the reservations in western Oklahoma were created for these Indians only because they brought the boy. To stitch the present with the past, I want to tell you what the girls.
Stitching the past to the present. This is Oklahoma Gold. Wade Burleson, the magic of a 5-year-old Arapaho boy? Tell me the story.
Well, Gwen, this little Indian boy, he's now 5 years old, Wilson Graham. He's been in the traveling circus. William Tecumseh Sherman has found him, brought him to Medicine Lodge. I'm telling these 2 girls who are sitting there drinking their coffee and eating their donuts, this story, this little boy. And I say, all of the Cheyenne and Arapaho agree to a peace treaty and to come to Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, on reservations because the government brought this boy, the survivor of the Sand Creek Massacre. And I tell them that story, and of course they're wide-eyed, they're Cheyenne, Arapaho, and they have one question that they want to ask me. And they
Just one question?
Just one. Do you know what it was? They said, what happened to the boy? And I said, well, girls, he went back to his original name, White Shirt. And they gasped. They said, Pastor Wade, we are White Shirt. I said, what do you mean, Francesca? What do you mean, Alice? That's our name. We're White Shirt. Well, I knew enough to know that all the descendants of this circus boy lived in Oklahoma. And I said, is your mom here? And they brought their mom over. I had known their mom previously. And she said, yes, Pastor Wade. She said, their father's Alfred Whiteshirt. I said, really? Yeah, he died a few years ago. I said, well, Tom Whiteshirt is the circus boy's name. They said to me, wow, we've never heard this story, but Tom Whiteshirt is our forefather. Well, Tom Whiteshirt was the Indian boy. And come to find out, Whiteshirt goes back to his original name. He moves to the Cheyenne Arapaho Reservation. And by the way, for those of you in Oklahoma, if you don't know where that is, if you're ever going west on I-40, about 30 miles west of Oklahoma City, you come to Highway 81 at El Reno and you go north. There's a casino called Concho. Well, at Concho Casino is the Cheyenne Arapaho National Headquarters. This is where Tom Whiteshirt lived. His descendants are numerous throughout Oklahoma, including these two little girls. I used to be the chaplain for the Tulsa Police Department, and there was a descendant of Tom Whiteshirt who received the Medal of Honor from the TBD. He was a police officer himself, and for his heroism and courage in the line of duty, he received the highest award that the Tulsa Police Department ever gives. Well, I could not believe that these girls were descendants of Whiteshirt. And what was really amazing to me, Gwen, is this. This was Sunday, October the 15th. I'm telling them this story. It was just purely at random. I just sat down and told them this story of the circus boy. It was October the 15th. And the day that General William Tecumseh Sherman brought the circus boy who survived the Sand Creek Massacre to Medicine Lodge to negotiate with the Cheyenne and Arapaho and the Apache and the Comanche to move to western Oklahoma on reservations was October the 15th, 1867. 150 years to the day of when I was talking to those girls. And I realized as I was talking to them that this little boy is the reason that western Oklahoma has reservations, because the Native Americans, the Plainsmen Indians, would have fought to the death, would not have gone to Medicine Lodge and powwowed for 2 weeks and signed the peace treaty called the Medicine Lodge Peace Treaty, unless that circus boy, the son of an Arapaho chief, the survivor of the Sand Creek Massacre, who was placed in the circus for 3 years, unless he showed up at Medicine Lodge. Well, you know, I tell people all the time, Oklahoma has such rich history. We know of General William Tecumseh Sherman because of his march from Atlanta to the coast at the end of the Civil War in 1865, but very few people know that he went throughout the United States to find this circus boy, and when he found him and brought him to Medicine Lodge, that became the first official treaty between the United States government and the Plainsmen Indians. And all of the reservations that you see in western Oklahoma, not eastern Oklahoma, not the civilized tribes, they were here in the Trail of Tears, but all of the reservations of western Oklahoma of the Plainsmen Indians are a direct result of the circus boy at Medicine Lodge.
So I see you have stitched the past to the present, but what is the golden nugget?
Well, here's the golden nugget. After these two girls heard this incredible story, I could tell they were moved. They went to the worship services, and Gwen, you've got to know, I do history as a passion, but I'm also a pastor. And at the end of the service that these girls attended, they came down, there were tears in their eyes, and they said, you know, Pastor Wade, we appreciate you sat down and talked with us and told us the story of our forefather. We want to give our lives to Jesus Christ. And 2 weeks later, I baptized the great-great-granddaughters of the circus boy that is responsible for the reservations in western Oklahoma. And all I can say, Gwen, is this: the God that created this world is the God of all of us. There is no room for racism. He created the Native Americans, he created the Caucasians, and it was my privilege to baptize those two girls 2 weeks later.
The descendants of White Shirt. Now that's Oklahoma gold.